Hello and welcome to the Blue Collar Wealth Club. I am one of your hosts, Sheena White.
And I'm your other host, Jerry Garcia.
So today we're going to talk about the number one profit killer in the blue collar world.
I was going to say, this is very blue collar specific, especially.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I think it's kind of a profit killer no matter where you are, but I see it a lot in my blue collar businesses that I work with. They think it's just one of those things that just is.
Right.
And so they don't feel like they have much control over it. And I would say that it is literally, it's the one thing I try to work with them on to mitigate, and that is overtime.
Overtime, the profit killer.
Yes, because have the time and a half, right? So you're literally paying that same person for the same work product, but now you're paying 150% more.
Right.
So it's as if you have 1.5 guys on the job doing that, but you still only have the one.
Well, and that seems like a very easy thing to get caught up. You start doing that on a regular basis, and you got 2 guys on a job, and you're paying for 3. And then that adds up very quickly. Or you're talking a job that takes, 20 hours to complete, and you've paid for 3 guys for 20 hours as opposed to paying for 2 guys for 20 hours.
Yeah. So overtime, it's one of those things that a lot of times I think people get caught in we don't have a choice. We have to get the job done. But you have to think to yourself, okay, what are some other ideas? So like one of the things that I've talked to some of my clients when they have bigger jobs coming up, they know they're going to have a lot of overtime and they're like, okay, how do I mitigate this? Well, maybe we can hire like temp skilled labor. It's like I have a client who he's a plumber and he literally told his guys, look, no overtime. And they're like, oh, well, we're going to need you to hire, a couple guys for this thing coming up. And he's like, no, I'm not hiring full-time guys and you're not doing overtime. He's like, we'll get they have a system that they can get temp workers who aren't super skilled, but they're skilled enough to be those extra hands to get the work done on time without the overtime. Because it's cheaper to hire the temps for a couple weeks than it is to have their guys with a whole bunch of overtime.
Right. And you could probably find guys who have construction experience who do a lot of freelancing, right? And they may have some of at least the basic skills. I mean, there's a lot of things on a job that aren't the intensive, skilled, required type of jobs that happen on a job site. Not everyone is doing the very skilled work. There's a lot of stuff that goes on anybody can really pick up and do pretty quickly.
Well, like for instance, okay, so I used to own a concrete polishing company. And we did a lot of wet polishing. When you're doing wet polishing and when you're doing wet grinding, you have your big grinder, and then in front of the grinder, you need someone to push the slurry into the grinder path. That's all they do. They use a little squeegee and they just whoop, whoop, they just keep pushing it. Okay, I don't need much skill to push slurry with a squeegee into a grinder path. But my grinder technician, the person pushing the grinder, they need to know what they're doing because they can jack the floor. Like there's a lot of exposure there. They need to be skilled. But if I have 2 guys and they're both skilled at grinders and being the pusher of the grinder, then I can hire 2 basically rando guys off the street to push the slurry. So then I can have 2 grinders going versus 1. So now I've doubled my production time, but I have not doubled my cost because the slurry pusher dudes are cheap.
I was going to say, I mean, you could pay somebody who's not running that skilled work. You got 2 guys on a job and they're both grind workers and you're paying both of those guys $25 an hour. Well, one of them's only squeegeeing and you're only getting that one grinder working that whole time and they're having to work overtime to complete this job on time. You're paying both of them $37.50 for every hour of overtime they work when you could be paying both of them $25 an hour, be paying another non-skilled guy to push the slurry into the thing for $18 an hour, and you get the work done in half the time.
Well, yeah, because now you've doubled up. So think to yourself in your business, like what are the skilled things? Because you're a skilled trade, so you're gonna have skilled things, but that doesn't mean the entire scope of your work is skilled. Utilizing my example, the grinding and who's operating the machine, that is very skilled.
When you think about road work, right? You see the guys who are doing the road work. You've got the guys who are laying the asphalt, the guys who are smoothing it out, the guys who's running the steamroller. You also got the 2 people who are holding the stop signs and the slow signs. But point being, anybody can be trained to do that in a day.
That's true. So it's like, what are the things that you can get extra labor for to get your job running faster so that we can reduce that overtime? Because saying to yourself, oh, this is what it is not a good strategy. And I see it all the time. Like I had one client, it was crazy overtime. Like I was like, how are you guys even functioning right now with the amount of time? And they're like, well, we didn't have a choice.
Now, this is a discussion about overtime, but really it brings out to the larger scope of how you're running your business, and it's just saying, well, this is just what we have to do to make it work, and not thinking about ways to change that. How can you change that narrative? How can you change those costs by just rethinking? You could get the same job. You got your 2 skilled guys already. You're paying them already. They work for you on a regular basis. Yeah. They're going to be there every day. So instead of paying them an extra $12.75 each, you can hire 2 different guys, get the job done in half the time. Nobody's making overtime. You finish the job quickly and you can move on to another job and save yourself money. And that second job pays for everything and then some.
Well, and you have to think too, when your guys are on that 10th hour, do you think that the production rate, they're going slower?
Yeah.
And B, do you think the quality of work is the same? I don't think it is. Your quality goes down, your production rate goes down, and your costs go up. So in so many ways, overtime is not the answer. And thinking, to me, if you say to yourself, oh, it is what it is, we had to, it's so disempowering in the running of your business, because you're basically saying that you have no ability to change it, which I will never believe that that's true. You
have to be in control of your business. And like you're talking about, being disempowered to just say, this is the way it is. This is the way we've always done it.
Here. And that, to me, that sounds awful, because you need to be running your schedule, and you need to be running your production, and you need to be running a production budget and know what's going on. And that's how you become empowered to make change in your business, to make it run the way you want it to run, and to get the profit you want to get.
Well, that's everything that we try to teach, right? We want to empower you as the owner of the business to be able to take that step back and have the vision for your business. Your job is to say, okay, let me step back. And this is why we try to push so hard to get the right people in place to, you have your field guy who's going to manage all of your teams, and one guy who's the GM of the business who's going to kind of run those managers. And you can step back as the owner and really take an eye overseeing things and try to redirect. Okay, well, why is this costing us this much? I feel like it shouldn't. I feel like we could find a way to make this cheaper. Mm-hmm. So then you have the ability to step back and think. This is why we're very adamant about building your teams the right way, building your business in such a way where you can be the owner, where you're not so stuck in the grind of every day doing, that you're not taking that step back to say, hey, you're not just going to say, this is just the way we do it. You're going to take a step back and say, okay, wait, why do we do it this way?
Yeah.
How can we do it differently?
Well, and you want to become proactive versus reactive. I think a lot of times people are like, oh, well, they're always responding in the moment. But for instance, so taking my client as an example, he knows he has some big jobs coming up. And so his guys are like, oh man, we're going to have overtime. He's like, no, I'm hiring temps. So he knows, he's looking ahead. He knows his schedule. He's saying, this is my budget. I know I'm going to need extra guys to stay on track. And so I'm going to go hire them. Versus getting in the moment and saying, oh man, now all of a sudden we have 3 jobs and we don't know what to do. We're just going to have to work overtime. Because then you don't have time to hire the temps. You don't have time to do this. Really becoming proactive in your business.
And having those contractors that are always looking for work, and having this network of them so you can say, hey, I've got some extra work coming up. Are you going to be available in the next couple weeks? And having those guys mentally prepared to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to have a job coming up. This is sweet. They're going to know they're getting hours coming in. It helps them out. It helps you out, and planning ahead. And he can do that once again because he's had the foresight to be able to step back, take a look at what's coming up and say, all right, we're going to need some extra bodies here. So instead of working his guys 12, 14 hours a day, he's going to allow them to work only 8 hours a day, the most productive 8 hours, and bring other guys in to kind of assist them. So their focus is on what they do best.
And you can look into different temp services and stuff like that. So he uses a specific temp service that is designed for his industry, but there's a ton of different temp services out there too. And the one nice thing too, when you utilize some temp workers, he's in commercial, so it takes a hot second for him to get paid. Your employees, you have to pay pretty right away, but certain temp services will allow you to pay later too. So with the temp service, he actually gets to pay for the temp workers after he's already paid by his client. It's even better for his cash flow management than overhead. Than overtime. So not only is he saving money he's also helping his cash flow. So it's like kind of it's a twofer.
Well, it's not even just that. I mean, you think about overtime. Okay, you have your employees, like you said. It's not just the time savings you're getting. Your employees, you have to provide benefits to if they're working.
I mean, you have to, so you're required to have unemployment insurance, you have your FICA, you have your FUTA, you have all your payroll taxes, all of the above.
But for contractors,
dollar to dollar.
temp workers, you're not having to provide all those additional things if they truly are temp workers and or contractors.
Yeah, it's just an invoice.
So you're not just saving the overtime costs. You're not just saving the time costs, the production quality, the quality of the work. You're saving a lot of these other benefits that you would have to provide if you're working your guys' overtime. And speaking of the quality of work and they lag overtime, that's where more mistakes are made. That's when you have more insurance claims. You're going to have those way more often on the 9th and 10th hour of work than you are on the first 2 or 3 or 4 hours.
Well, or, say they make a mistake and then now you have to pay even more overtime to fix it.
So this is not just a talk about, it's not just saving the cost of paying for overtime. You are saving your business in a lot of different areas. And that's what's going to protect your cash flow for the future and allow you to continue to scale. And if you've got contractors that you've worked with on a regular basis and now you are growing and you need to bring somebody in, you don't really have to do a formalized interview. You can say, hey, look, you've worked for me a bunch of times. I really like the way you work. Do you want a full-time gig with us?
That's a good testing ground for prospective employees, because then instead of getting them on payroll and all that, maybe hire them for a couple temp jobs here and there as just a sub. And then you can go into the next, if you like them, hire them. And if you don't, well, then you don't.
Well, and I mean, it's a great way to test guys. People are always asking businesses, hey, are you guys hiring? It's like, I'm not looking for anybody full-time right now, but I'm going to need some extra hands on a couple jobs I have coming up. Why don't you come by? We'll throw you on a couple jobs and see how it works out. And the next time I do need somebody full-time, and it's a good way. It's a good working interview. If they work great, awesome. You have somebody that you want to bring in. If not, then even better. You found out very cheaply that that's not the person for your company.
I mean, and I've had that experience too, where we thought that somebody was great. They have the resume, all the things, and then you bring them in and it's like, whoa, okie dokie then. You don't do things the way we do things and you think you know better, so that's not really going to work out. There's a lot of ways to do it, but I would say making sure you're not just having a whole bunch of 1099 contractors because you don't want to pay overtime.
Well, yeah, and there's an important distinction there, right? Well, that's why we say if they truly are temp workers, truly are contractors, there's very defined laws depending on what state you're in. If they're a contractor, they can't expect it to be showing up every day at your office at 9 o'clock and expected to work only for you between the hours of 9 and 5 every single day. That's an employee.
Especially in every state is a little different, their employment law, but like for example, here in Colorado, they have very defined what is an employee and what isn't. And if you are found to have misclassified your employees to avoid paying your workman's comp and unemployment and FICA and FUTA, they will actually decide when they thought that employee was an employee, and they will backdate all of it and then add penalties and interest.
There's no getting away from that. Having truly having contractors and temp employees is important to actually make sure that that's what they are. If they're expected to only work for you and work for you full time and only be on your job sites and only wearing your company gear, and I mean, let's be real, we want you to be specific about actually having contractors and temp workers to protect yourself and to protect them too. I mean, you're not doing them a favor by, giving them work, but avoiding paying them the benefits that they actually earn.
Yeah, well, and that's why the government's so specific about it, because it is an employee protection. And a lot of people will say, oh, I can't afford that. And I would question again, why? Why can't you afford that? And if you can't, then let's figure out some different structures so that you can. Maybe your pricing is off. Maybe you have other issues in your cost of goods sold. Maybe you're paying them a rate that isn't sustainable. And so you need to lessen the hourly rate because you're going to add in those different taxes and stuff like that. Because honestly, part of it, the employee is paying one way or another. Because if you 1099 them, so if they're like, oh, well, now I'm going to have to, you're paying me less. It's like those FICA and FUTA taxes specifically, if you're self-employed, you have to pay them for yourself. So if you just explain that to the employee, like, hey, actually, once I pay the taxes for you, you're going to come away with more or the same sometimes it's just a conversation and explaining the math to them.
Well, and if you're not able to afford these things, talking about why, I mean, maybe you're pricing your jobs wrong. If that's what it takes to make this job profitable for you, then you need to be pricing it in such a way that you can have the correct amount of employees, that you're allotting the right amount of time for this job, that your material costs are on point. Like, all of this stuff is important for understanding your business. Just saying that, I can't afford that, is just kicking the rock down the road and not paying attention to the reasons why. We like to always talk about, if I can afford that, but how can I afford it?
Yeah.
How can I afford this? How can I do this? Because that's where it comes down to. You really need to be in control of understanding your business and not pricing something a specific way because that's how you've always priced it.
Or because you asked a friend. But we will do a whole nother episode on pricing. But yeah, I mean, I actually had somebody that were like, well, everybody does this. Nobody has only employees. And I call bull crap on that, because when I had my construction company, other than temp workers, we only had employees because we wanted to have them show up on a specific time wearing our shirt. We wanted to train them in our methods and have them use our methods and have, non-solicitation agreements so they couldn't just go take our methods other places. So, and they were all W-2 employees. And sometimes that was rough. There were times when it was like, but at the end of the day, when we were really going, it was so much better that way. The employees liked it better. We liked it better. Everyone was happy. The government liked it better.
Well, it makes it truly your business, right?
Yeah.
Your business, you are responsible for the feeding of not only your family, but, if you have employees, you're responsible for making sure that they stay fed, and having employees keeps you all on the same page. So, if they're truly employees, that's great. They're working for your business. You're all working toward the same goal. Those temp workers, those, contractors, they're there to help you meet your job requirements to complete jobs, but they're not part of your business and they don't operate as such typically. So you want to make sure that, yes, you're treating people the right way. You're paying your employees, but not overworking them at the same time, because that's what gets people looking elsewhere for employment.
And you want to have them want to be team your company,
yeah.
Right? When they're on and off the job. But I think that employees, especially when they get to a place where they need more money, then all of a sudden magically overtime is necessary. So it's the same, when I talk about Profit First or Clockwork, all of Mike Michalowicz's books, he uses Parkinson's Law as one of his big tenets. And that says that whatever's available to someone, they will use up. It's the same thing with when you get the brand new tube of toothpaste, you just lather it on, versus when you have, you're at the end of it, you're like pushing out that very little. And so as humans, when we have constraint of resources, that's when we become very, very ingenious. That's when all different technologies arise and things like that has to do with constraint. So we need to do that in our businesses. That's why we need budgets. And that's why we need to constrain the amount of money, because when the money's just flowing in and flowing out, it's just like, I don't know where it went. We're just spending it, right? Because that's humans. And it's the same with our employees. We need to have that constraint and say, no, overtime is not allowed unless it's approved. And you need to be strict on that. And just cause isn't a reason. We need to have attribution, because too, that's the only way we can change things for the future, right? So maybe in the moment something did go right and we do need to spend some extra time, or maybe we needed to get to a very specific point this day, so we're going to spend an extra hour, but maybe we can come an hour late the next day. So really in real time making those decisions so that you don't have this bloat of your worker overhead on every job.
Well, yeah, and I think nobody's better at that kind of ingenuity than if you've ever been broke. I mean, you learn how to make things stretch a lot further. Like you're talking about the end of the toothpaste tube, but even little things that we pay for every single month that we think are necessary. Once something happens and you realize you're going to be broke, a lot of these necessary things become very unnecessary very quickly. A lot of luxuries we pay for in life, that we don't even realize, that we feel like we kind of have to have this, kind of need two cars. But if you're broke, and you can get rid of one of your car payments and somebody can pay for a bus pass and make their way to and from work pretty easily that way, all of a sudden that seems like a much more appetizing option. I didn't have a car, and I went to school far away from where I lived, and I worked far away from where I lived, and I had a bus pass, man. I got around on the bus because that's what it took for me at the time. And actually I probably could have afforded a car at the time, but that's where I was at. You learn how to do things yourself. You learn how to spend as little as possible on things. And I think a lot of times as the more money has come in, you forget that. You forget how to live broke. And it's important to kind of keep that mindset, not a broke mindset, but a mindset of how do you make things stretch further? How do you make things operate as efficiently as possible? And one of those things like you're talking about is just saying, well, we have to give everyone overtime. Well, if you physically can't afford to pay them overtime, you're going to find a way. Okay, well, let's just cut off the job time here. We'll come in tomorrow and start over, and maybe it's an extra day, but we've saved all those costs and we can actually still get the job done on time if we're doing this instead of this.
Yeah, just thinking to yourself, what can I do to reduce this, or how can we think about it a different way? Because I think, again, if you just say, oh, it is what it is, and you're really limiting your own mind's ability to find the options. Because our brains are pretty awesome. If we put up a problem in front of them, our brain goes to work and we'll try to solve the problem. And that's why sometimes like clients will come to me with things and I'll be like, let me noodle on that. And at first they're like, what? I'm like, well, I just, you gave me the problem, but I don't have a solution right now. I don't have a great idea, but I'm going to put it in there, and the brain's going to do the thing. And then later something will pop out. Magical. It might be terrible. I don't know, but something will pop out, but giving yourself that time. And that's again where we need to be proactive, giving ourselves that time to noodle on things and to have our brains figure out a great idea and be, ingenious.
I think this conversation extended past just overtime, but in a lot of good ways, because it's all very relevant to this one specific problem, but it can be attributed to a lot of other ways of problem solving as well.
Well, yeah, and overtime, it's one of those things where it feels like the beast we can't ever overcome, but I think there's a lot of different ways, and just try different things. And worst case scenario, you are stuck with overtime, but I don't see how that would ever be really 100% necessary.
There's always a solution.
There's always a solution. So yeah, really look at that bottom line and start to think, how can we be more proactive in our planning for our humans so we can avoid our profit killer overtime?
Well, there you go. Well, I think that will do it for this episode.
Thanks for joining us on the Blue Collar Wealth Club, and we'll see you next time.